Can helicopters fly through clouds? Let's talk about that. Hey, my name is Devin. I'm a commercial pilot and a helicopter flight instructor with the goal of making helicopters more understandable. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about helicopters flying through clouds. So stick around for a couple more minutes and we're going to talk about my favorite instrument approach, and that'll be really fun. The first thing I want to talk about in this video is the instrument world. So for anyone that doesn't know, aircraft don't just fly when it's clear and beautiful sunny days. We also fly when the weather is poor, and even in weather when we can't see anything but clouds, and we are in the clouds. And the system we've come up with this is called IFR. So we have two different types of flying styles. We have VFR and IFR. VFR stands for visual flight rules, and this is when we can see what we're doing. We can see laterally out and we can see vertically down, and we're just navigating by our eyesight. The other type of flying style we have is called instrument flight rules, or IFR. We have specially designed instruments in our aircraft that tell us where to go and how to navigate. So according to the website Think Aviation, they define VFR, or visual flight rules, as ceiling greater than 3,000 feet and visibility greater than 5 miles, including clear skies. So from the ground, there's no ceiling less than 3,000 feet, and you can see at least 5 miles laterally. We have marginal VFR, which is just a little bit worse, and they define that as ceilings 1,000 to 3,000 feet and or visibility 3 to 5 miles. So just a little bit worse, but you can still relatively see. Next, they define IFR, or instrument flight rules, as ceilings 500 to 1,000 feet and visibility 1 to 3 miles. And then they define finally low IFR as ceilings less than 500 feet above the ground and visibility less than 1 mile. So just to be clear, we've got two flying styles. VFR, we can see what we're doing, we're looking outside. We've got IFR when we're looking at the instruments and we can't see. There's a couple different types in between, but VFR and IFR are the overall types. Now the next thing I want to make clear, because this was not clear to me when I got started with aviation, how an instrument flight would work is you would depart from an airport. The conditions don't have to be great. They can actually honestly be quite poor, and you can still depart from an airport. You fly up, and the entire time you're en route making your way to your destination, you can be totally in the clouds and not see anything. And the part that I really want to talk about is the instrument approach. So we're going to talk about an ILS approach. ILS, it stands for Instrument Landing System, and this is typically the highest category approach that most aircraft can fly. There are a couple higher category classes that some aircraft and some pilots can fly. We'll talk about those in a second, but the ILS is typically the highest category that just regular aircraft can fly. So how the approach works is, I originally thought the instruments would get you all the way down to the runway and you would land without being able to see anything. That is not how it works. How it works, the instruments will get you down to about 200 feet above the ground, at which point you need to break out into clear conditions and make a visual approach just by hand flying down to the ground. If you do not break out of the clouds and you are still in the clouds once you get to 200 feet, you go what's called missed, because you weren't able to break out, so you missed the approach, and you are going to climb out and you're going to go hold at some waypoint, some GPS waypoint, until you figure out where you can go and safely get the aircraft down on the ground. There are some category 2 and some category 3 aircraft and pilots that can land all the way down to the ground, but this is exceedingly rare and totally not how most aircraft work. Even the commercial airlines typically just fly this ILS approach, and if they don't break out, they go missed. The next question is, can helicopters legally fly IFR? The answer is yes. However, it is not as common as fixed wing or as planes are. There's two reasons. The first reason is helicopters are inherently unstable. Anyone that has flown a helicopter will tell you that the thing kind of just wants to tear itself apart. If you take your hand off the cyclic, it kind of wants to just roll and move and be out of control. Versus a plane, once you get it trimmed out and you get it straight and level, it'll kind of just sit there and be happy there, and it's inherently stable. But because helicopters are inherently stable, if we take that and then we also put it in this disorienting condition of flying in clouds, it's just a very difficult time, so it's just not as common for helicopters. The second reason is the instrument world was not built for helicopters. It was entirely built for airplanes. Now the helicopters have adapted to it, and the helicopters can do everything that the fixed wing world can. However, it's just not built for us. So yes, we can do it. However, it's just less common. But in terms of if we can do it and if it's legal, yeah, we can. Let's talk about it. We're gonna jump into the AIM, which is the Airman's Information Manual, and it's in the back of the FAR AIM book. and it's going to explain to us what helicopters need to be able to fly instrument. Okay, here we are in the AIM. We are in section 10.1.1, helicopter flight control systems. So we're going to talk about what helicopters need to be able to fly in instrument conditions. A. The certification requirements for helicopters to operate under instrument flight rules are contained, blah, 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 blah. To meet these requirements, helicopter manufacturers usually utilize a set of stabilization and/or automatic flight control systems. Typically, these systems fall into the following categories: aerodynamic surfaces, which impart some stability or control capability not found in the basic VFR configuration; trim systems, which provide a cyclic centering effect; stability augmentation systems, SASs, which provide short-term rate dampening control inputs to increase helicopter stability; attitude retention systems, which return the helicopter to a selected attitude after a disturbance; autopilot systems, which provide for hands-off flight along specified lateral and vertical paths, including heading, altitude, vertical speed, navigation tracking, and approach. These systems typically have a control panel for mode selection and systems for indication of mode status. Autopilots may or may not be installed with an associated flight director system. So that last one is what we really care about. There's multiple different systems. The autopilot system can typically work along the roll axis, so it can control roll. It can also control pitch, so it can pitch the nose up and pitch the nose down. It can also control the yaw, so it can control the tail rotor and control the way the nose turns. So it can essentially fly the aircraft all by itself, controlling its altitude, its speed, everything. Moving on to part C. In order to be certified for IFR operation, a specific helicopter may require the use of one or more of these systems in any combination. So we may have to use 2 or 3 of these systems. In many cases, helicopters are certified for IFR operations with either 1 or 2 pilots. Certain equipment is required to be installed and functional for 2 pilot operations, and typically additional equipment is required for a single pilot. That makes sense. If you're a single pilot and you're flying in instrument conditions, the workload is extremely high. You have to fly the aircraft, you have to talk to air traffic control, you have to navigate, you have to make sure you're within all your parameters. And unlike an airplane, you can't just take your hands off and work with the GPS and touch the screens and make sure everything is where it needs to be. The helicopter, you have to fly it constantly and make sure everything is accurate. So it really helps to have an autopilot system, so you can work on the GPS, you can talk to ATC, and you're not super concerned about just holding straight and level. That attitude retention system is also a great feature. If you go through instrument training, and just a common piece of knowledge I want you to have is flying in instrument conditions is extremely disorienting. And it is one of the #1 causes of helicopter accidents and aviation accidents as a whole. It's called spatial disorientation, and what happens is when you lose sight of the ground and you have to switch over to your instruments, it can be extremely disorienting. Even though the helicopter could potentially be pitching up, you inside of your body may feel like you're pitching down. So you may make the control input to get the helicopter back to a level attitude if you feel like you're nose down, but you may be at a pitch up attitude, and if you pull aft, it's just going to make it worse. So you can lose total spatial awareness of what the helicopter is doing, and it leads to crashes very quickly. So having these autopilot systems and these attitude retention systems are lifesavers. In addition, you need more equipment than you typically would need for VFR flight. Specifically when you're flying in the clouds, and if you're flying in relatively cold conditions, you can get icing. We have what's called a pitot tube, and this is kind of like a straw on the front of the aircraft. So as we're moving along, air molecules go into that pitot tube, into that straw, and it measures how fast we're going. Well, if you're flying in the clouds and it's relatively cold, that pitot tube can ice over and it can be completely filled with ice. If you lose your airspeed indication, that can become extremely hazardous. The reason being is, let's say it slowly happens. If your airspeed slowly starts to decrease, you may think that the helicopter, oh, we're just slowing down, we're at 60 knots, 50 knots, 40 knots, 30 knots, 20 knots, 0 knots. So you're like, oh, we're just pitching up, so we need to push forward to start going faster. You may be straight and level. So if you push forward, you could slowly push yourself into a diving condition. So that's something you want to avoid. You need a pitot heat system so that pitot heat can warm up and melt all the ice. In addition, you need some engine anti-ice protection so that you don't have ice built up in your engine, so that your engine continues to work, and multiple other systems. So flying in the IFR world does require additional equipment. The next thing we're going to talk about is helicopter instrument approaches. Like I said, helicopters can do everything that airplanes can do, including in the IFR world, helicopters can fly every single published instrument approach procedure. And you may see that acronym IAP, Instrument Approach Procedure. And what this IAP is, let's say we departed somewhere and we're about to land somewhere, how we actually get down to the runway is most of the time we're gonna hit different GPS fixes. So we have our GPS, so air traffic control will say, hey, go to this fix, and then this fix, and then this fix, and then this fix. And we've got a procedure designed so that we can hit this fix, and this fix, and this fix, and we will be lined up with the runway. And then that instrument approach procedure will also tell us what altitude we need to be at each fix. So if this is the runway, there may be an initial approach fix right here, and it says, okay, you need to be at 2,500 feet. And then it's gonna say, all right, at this fix, you need to be at 1,200 feet. At this fix, you need to be at a certain altitude, and then you'll come down to the runway. So we've got a GPS waypoint with a certain altitude, and this is pretty much how we're gonna work our way down. So that is a super general understanding of how instrument approaches work, and helicopters can do every single one that airplanes can do. So let's jump back into my computer, and I'm super slowly gonna walk you through a general instrument approach procedure. And this one's actually my favorite because it's really fun and it's really easy, and it's specifically designed for helicopters. Okay, so right now we're looking at the website called SkyVector, and this is all of the aviation maps. And don't be alarmed, I know it looks like a lot, but I'm gonna walk you through it super slowly and easily. So if we come over here to JFK, I'm gonna pull up the Copter RNAV GPS 27-degree heading approach. So here is what's called the approach plate, and this is what would be sitting on my knee or maybe on my iPad or a screen in the helicopter. And this is every single piece of information I need to fly from the clouds and break out into clear conditions and fly to my destination. This says everything. So this is published out of John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York, New York. This is Copter, so this is specifically a helicopter approach. RNAV, which just means GPS, to a 27-degree heading. Then up here it says use John F. Kennedy International Altimeter setting. What that means is, I'm sure on the weather you've heard, oh, there's a high pressure system coming in, or there's a low pressure system coming in. Well, when we're flying and we need to know how high off the ground we are. So maybe we're 500 feet above the ground, but if a high pressure system comes in or a low pressure system comes in, that can mess with our instrumentation telling us how high we are. So we need to know the accurate altimeter setting to set into our altimeter, which is the tool that tells us how high we are. And with that information, we will properly be able to tell our actual altitude. So we use John F. Kennedy's altimeter setting. So we set the altimeter, and that's because it's the closest airport and it's gonna be the most accurate for what we need. And then it says, missed approach, climbing left turn to 1,800 feet, direct cover and hold. So we'll talk about that in a second. And then we have some different frequencies here. These are the people we're talking to. This is the weather. So every single hour we get new weather information. So where are the winds coming from? How high are the clouds? Is it raining? So on and so forth, information like that. Then down here we have the actual diagram of what's happening. So what this is saying is we're gonna start from somewhere down here, and then the first fix we're gonna hit, this is called the initial approach fix, the initial area where we're gonna start the approach, and it's a fix, a waypoint, just a GPS position, and we're gonna hit that fix. We're gonna hit that waypoint. So we're gonna come in and hit Banca as our initial approach fix, and then we're gonna be flying a 029 heading. So if you were to look at our compass at this point, it would say 029. So that's basically a northeast heading. So we'll hit Banca, then we'll hit a 029 heading, and we'll fly this for 4.1 miles. And then the next fix, or the next waypoint we're gonna hit is called Cover. And we're gonna hit Cover as our intermediary fix. And then once we hit Cover, we're gonna continue on a 027 heading. So we're gonna be flying a 027 magnetic heading. And we will fly this for 3.2 miles, and we will hit Wern. Wern is our final approach fix. This is the last fix before we go down. And after Wern, we're gonna continue down, and if we don't break out, we're gonna go missed at our missed approach point named Helog. So we will continue down and hopefully we break out. So if we break out, we're gonna proceed in visual conditions where we can see to our desired destination. Maybe that's the downtown Manhattan heliport, maybe that's the East 34th Street heliport, maybe that's the West 30th Street heliport, and that's if we do break out. If we do not break out, if we are still in the clouds at the time we get to the missed approach point, we're gonna go missed. And if you remember at the top of the sheet, it said missed approach, climbing left turn to 1800 feet, direct cover and hold. So if we're coming down to Helog and we have not broken out, so we're still in the clouds, we need to go missed at this point. So we're gonna make a climbing left turn, and then at this time we're gonna punch in the covert intersection at our GPS. We're gonna fly to cover, and then you can see this is our holding pattern. So we're just gonna sit here and fly in a racetrack, and we're just gonna sit here and wait until we figure out what we're going to do. So down here we have our altitudes. So we're gonna hit Banca at 1800. Well, here's Banca. This is a GPS waypoint. Then we're gonna continue on a 029 heading to cover at 1800. So we go Banca to cover, 029 heading. We're gonna be at 1800 feet. 1800 feet. Then we're going to continue on a 027 heading at 1800 feet to Wern. So cover to Wern, 027 heading at 1800 feet. And then we're going to descend after Wern, which is our final approach fix. And we can see down here the Maltese cross. This is our final approach fix on a 027 heading down to Helog. So Wern down to Helog. Now, how low can we go on this approach? Well, we can go to 500 feet. If we're descending down, we can go to 500 feet. And then when we get to our missed approach point, which is Helog, MAP, missed approach point, if we have not broken out, then we go missed. So you can see that it's gonna tell us which waypoints that we're gonna hit, the headings we need to fly, the altitudes to be at. Then on our final approach fix, we just fly a 027 magnetic heading down to 500 feet, and then proceed VFR from missed approach point. So once we get to the missed approach point, we can go from there to our destination. And if we don't break out, then we'll just go missed, and we'll do a climbing left turn and hold at cover. So if we go missed, we'll make a climbing left turn, go to cover and hold. Climbing left turn to 1800, direct covert and hold. That may sound like a lot, but for a lot of you that's gonna make sense. And instrument approaches are basically just like that. There are some that get more complex, but that's essentially how an instrument approach works. When I really started to grasp instrument and fly these approaches, it became one of my top favorite flying styles. I truly enjoy the instrument world. The primary reason why is, let's say that this is our landing zone that we wanna make in the helicopter. So we're gonna come in on just like a regular, normal approach and come down. While I'm flying this, I'm gonna look at my spot and it's like, oh, I feel kind of high, I need to come down. Oh, I feel kind of slow, I need to slow down. I'm kind of just feeling it, and there's nothing really concrete about it. It just feels, and I'm looking at it and I'm judging my spot and I'm making it down there. Versus instrument, it is black or white, man. It is clear as day. You are either where you're supposed to be and at the right altitude, or you're not. There's no feelings in IFR. You're either where you need to be or you're not. And I really enjoy that. Quite difficult because it's not clear, but it's really nice to either be on your path or not. But there's tons to IFR. It's very task saturating to get all of this, to get it loaded into the GPS, to talk to air traffic control. It's a lot. The final point I want to make for any students that are going to start their IFR training, how it works, is if you are in a Robinson helicopter or pretty much any helicopter, and you are doing your instrument rating or your CFII rating, your certified flight instructor instrument, so you can teach instrument like I am. We do all of these procedures in VFR conditions. So we only fly it when it's clear. In the fixed wing world and in fixed wing that are IFR capable, they'll go out and do it in the instrument world, but we do it all when it's clear. So we will ask ATC to practice a certain procedure, but we will say while remaining VFR. So we're not gonna fly ourselves into any clouds. And the reason is, most of the helicopters we're flying, like I've got experience with Robinson helicopters, they can do all the instrument procedures, and we have all the instruments to be able to do it. They don't have the required equipment like the autopilot or the pitot heat system. Potentially they're working on it, they just don't have it right now. All right, that's gonna wrap up this video. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoy the instrument world. I'm happy to talk about it. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. I'd be happy to do a back and forth just so I can get more experience. If you have anything to say about any of the points I made, leave them down in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell indication so you get notified every time I post a new video. And I'll see you guys on the next one.